Picture this. It's late November 1950, and the Korean War, yeah, everyone thought it was pretty much over. UN forces were steamrolling towards the Chinese border, and the troops were all being told they'd be home for Christmas. But in just one disastrous week, that dream exploded into an absolute nightmare. So today, we're going to dive into the battle that completely flipped the script on the entire war, the Battle of the Chungcheon River. And this quote right here from the big man himself, General Douglas MacArthur, it tells you everything you need to know about the mood at the top. It's not just confidence, it's straight up swagger. His home by Christmas offensive was supposed to be the final victory lap. And the soldiers on the ground, coming off a big Thanksgiving dinner, they bought it completely. The war was in the bag. Or so they thought. Okay, so this slide, this is where that supreme confidence just smacks headfirst into a brick wall of reality. This wasn't just a small oversight. This was a colossal failure of intelligence. UN command saw what it wanted to see. Maybe a few thousand, 30,000 max, Chinese volunteers. The reality? Well, it was a little different. We're talking over 230,000 soldiers who had slipped across the border completely undetected, hiding out in those rugged mountains, just waiting. So that's the big question, isn't it? How does this happen? How does an army that thinks it's on the verge of total victory get so completely dismantled that it's forced into the longest, most desperate retreat in American military history? The answer is a chilling combination of brilliant strategy, brutal terrain, and the pure, paralyzing shock of what was about to hit them. All right, let's set the stage. November 24th, 1950. The Home by Christmas offensive officially kicks off. The U.S. 8th Army and its allies are pushing north, totally convinced they're just mopping up the last few stragglers of a broken enemy. The final scene of the war was supposedly playing out. You have to understand, the vibe among the troops was, well, it was dangerously chilled out. Morale was through the roof, but that bred a really fatal sense of carelessness. You've got guys literally chucking their helmets and extra ammo just to lighten their load for the walk to the finish line. And maybe worst of all, they were facing down a brutal Korean winter with temperatures plunging way below freezing without the right gear. Not good. So, while the UN guys are strolling north out in the open, their opponents are doing something else. They're quietly, and I mean meticulously, setting up the perfect trap. The Chinese People's Volunteer Army, or PVA, under Commander Peng Dehuai, had pulled off an incredible deception, moving hundreds of thousands of men into position by only marching at night. I mean, just let that number sink in for a second. 230,000. It's almost hard to wrap your head around an intelligence failure that big. This wasn't just walking into an ambush. This was walking into something so massive, so beyond what they could even imagine, that they were completely and totally outnumbered where it mattered most. And you know, when you look at how these two armies stack up, it's just wild. On paper, the UN has all the advantages. Overwhelming firepower, total control of the skies, trucks to bring in supplies. But here's the genius part. The PVA flipped the script. They turned every single one of their weaknesses into a strength. No trucks meant they weren't stuck on roads. They could pour over the mountains. Not enough guns meant they had to get in close, using stealth and night attacks to make the UN's fancy technology totally useless. So the night of November 25th rolls around. The UN advance has just settled in for the day. And then, out of the freezing dark, these strange bugles start to sound all along the valley. And then, a human wave of PVA soldiers just crashes into the stunned and completely unprepared UN lines. The trap was sprung. The PVA knew exactly where the weak spot was. They went straight for the Republic of Korea's I-Corps, the weakest link in the whole UN line. And it was fast. I mean, brutally fast. Within hours, there's this massive hole punched right through the line. PVA units just start pouring through that gap, hitting the UN forces in the back, cutting their supply lines. By the next day, an entire Army Corps was just gone. It had disintegrated. The whole right side of the army had collapsed. And here's the thing about a hole like that in your battle line. It's not a local problem. It's a disaster for everybody. It was like the first domino falling in a terrifying chain reaction, exposing the flanks of the American divisions right next to them and turning the whole situation into a desperate, chaotic scramble for survival. This timeline really just lays out how incredibly fast everything fell apart. I mean, look at this. You go from a confident push on the 25th to MacArthur finally realizing he's got a full-blown crisis on his hands by the 28th. And then, the 29th, that's the nail in the coffin. A Chinese division has cut off the main escape route for the U.S. 2nd Division, setting the stage for the absolute worst part of this disaster.
But, even in all this chaos, you see these incredible moments of pure guts. The Turkish brigade was thrown into the gap to try and stop the bleeding, and they got absolutely hammered by a much larger PVA force. But they fought like hell and took devastating losses. But that stand they made at Wawan, it bought just enough precious time for the American 2nd Division to pull back and not get wiped out right then and there.
Okay, so all of this chaos, it's all building to one single horrifying point, the most infamous part of the whole battle. For the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division, this wasn't just a retreat anymore. It was a desperate fight for survival, in a place that would forever be known as the Gauntlet.
I want you to really try and imagine this. What do? You've got an entire enemy division that just appeared out of nowhere and is now sitting on your only road home. There is no plan B, no way around. You have to go through them. How on earth do you do that?
From a tactical perspective, this was a complete nightmare, an absolute death trap. The PVA were up on the high ground on both sides of this narrow valley road. Every single soldier, every single truck had to drive through this 6-mile-long killing zone with machine guns and mortars just raining down from above.
And this quote from Lieutenant Colonel Kelleher, man, it just paints a picture of pure hell on earth. The road was choked with burning trucks, with the dead, and with wounded men trying to claw their way onto any vehicle that was still moving. Any sense of organized units? Gone. It just became a mad scramble for survival through a corridor of death. And the price paid in that valley, it was just staggering. Over 4,000 casualties in the U.S. 2nd Division in just a few days. The division was shattered as a fighting unit. It lost most of its artillery, tons of its vehicles. We're talking one of the worst beatings a single American division took in the entire 20th century.
That experience in the Gauntlet, it completely broke the UN's will to fight. What came next wasn't a strategic withdrawal. It was a rout, a headlong flight south that would go down in the books as a true low point in American military history.
120 miles. That's how far they ran. It was fueled by what the guys on the ground called bug-out fever. Basically this contagious panic where everyone's only thought was, get out, now! The 8th Army didn't really stop running until it was all the way back south of the 38th parallel, more or less right back where the war had started.
So, what was the fallout from all of this? It was massive. The 8th Army alone took over 11,000 casualties. All of North Korea was abandoned. But the biggest thing, any hope of a quick end to the war was gone, smashed. Instead of going home for Christmas, these soldiers were now facing a new, brutal war that was going to grind on for another 2.5 bloody years.
And you have to remember, for the other side, this was an absolutely legendary victory. The PVA 38th Corps, the guys who pulled off that insane march to set up the Gauntlet, they were given the highest honor their commander could bestow, becoming known forever as the 10,000 Years Corps.
And that really brings us to the big takeaway here, the final chilling question. How could one single week, a week of total overconfidence, of catastrophic intelligence failures, of sheer chaos on the battlefield, how could that 1 week in November 1950 not only change a war, but also set the stage for the decades of frozen conflict on the Korean Peninsula that we still live with to this very day?